So September marks Heritage Month in our country, and in fact Heritage Day, which falls on September 24th, is used to celebrate our diversity and culture. That's going to be marked tomorrow. One of the ways we can preserve our culture is by certainly maintaining our heritage sites. These are also, put together to create jobs and boost local economic development. Let's unpack this for you now. Bring in historian, Advocate Sonwabile Mancotywa, who joins us now via our video link this morning. Advocate, great to see you. Thanks for making time to chat to us about this. Perhaps as a start, I wonder how happy you are about the state of some of our heritage sites, given the challenges we've heard already about, for instance, Robben Island, and what it takes to keep it going.
Yes, these heritage sites are not only, tourist attraction areas, although they play that role, but these are reservoirs of knowledge and centers of excellence. Now, since South Africa got admitted, within the ambit of the United Nations under UNESCO, we have seen South Africa inscribing more than, I think about 12 World Heritage Sites, and a number of sites, declared as national heritage sites and provincial heritage sites and local. But there had not been, much significant impact on the heritage site, on the presence of these sites at two levels, on their social role in socio-economic development, and as well as to ensure that as public goods, they actually increase or enhance social consciousness amongst the communities where they are. I think one of the problems that we see, because it's because of the ownership model that our country and the government has preferred, where the government owns heritage sites. And I think there's not been much benchmarking done. I mean, for instance, if you look at the performance of Robben Island that we have already spoken about, compared to a neighboring site like Table Mountain. Robben Island is facing a lot of problems with, boats not operating. And I think the state could actually, outsource, some of the, more especially, operations of such sites. And Table Mountain, for instance, has been much more, active and contributing to the GDP of Cape Town. You know why? It is because of the ownership models. So the state actually should not be obsessed with ownership of heritage sites, but instead should actually, set norms and standards, allow certain areas on the site, like for instance operations, to be driven by private sector, but whilst ensuring that the preservation, areas, areas that need to be protected, actually, covered through in SLA. You can actually employ something like, for instance, the Rose. In our country, where there's build, operate, and transfer, but also allow communities, because in the thesis, that I've been involved in on my PhD, on examining our heritage policies or genealogy of our heritage policies. Yeah. Our heritage sites are actually underperforming, in terms of the impact in the economy, but also in terms of public consciousness. One of the reasons is this obsession with ownership, and not allowing communities, to run the sites, and then that they know, for instance, and ensuring that SMMEs, if you go around heritage sites, there's no small and macro enterprises developing in the sites. Yeah. So it therefore leaves that the dream of those communities remains deferred.
Sure. And this is, I guess, linking to what I was hoping to ask you next. During the era of the government of national unity, there was this kind of drive to use culture to foster this kind of reconciliation we needed in this country. In fact, there was a white paper that was put together looking into the reconfiguration of some of these institutions. I wonder whether or not you feel that white paper was hitting the right marks, because these sites are not just buildings. They should be accompanied with some kind of ideological underpinning, so that they have a resonance in society and have this impact that you alluded to.
I think those were some of the strategic weaknesses of the white paper. Understanding the conditions on which the white paper was drawn, that we had a government of national unity, President Nelson Mandela wanted to use the culture to foster social cohesion. In fact, to foster, a nation building, and and reconciliation. So our white paper, for instance, never benefited from the ideological, writings and teachings of African scholars like Ngugi wa Thiong'o, Frans Fanon, and on decolonization of African heritage. But of course, having said that, one should understand that I know that there's been a review, process that of that white paper. Those are some of the shortcomings of our, heritage policy in South Africa. But above that, the whole issue of, not involving communities, where we've employed what I can call a supply approach than demand-driven policy. So our policies actually on heritage has been lacking in that aspect, of community, ownership.
Yeah.
Because heritage relies, or in fact, communities are custodians of heritage.
Sure.
So we can't have a situation where you've got the state officials only coming in September to dish heritage, like they're dishing loaves of bread for the, for the public. It's right. The other element has been actually a deficit in our policy of the heritage policy, that of ensuring that there's a benchmarking with African, cultures or African communities, like Ghana, for instance, how they've done. Tanzania, why Tanzania has preserved, Swahili, what is it that it has done, and our languages are dying in this way. So those are some of the policy in nuances now in heritage policies. How do we protect our indigenous communities? We have seen now some from China, Asia penetrating our indigenous, economies, and leaving our own people, in dire straits, because they cannot compete. Because I think government should be doing more to protect our indigenous communities.
Yeah.
In the design space, in the architecture, in many other things. So I'm saying therefore that heritage can't just be be a frivolous activity to be celebrated during the month of September.
Sure.
We need to ensure that we actually improve in ensuring that heritage becomes a strategic resource, not only to nation building, but also to economic development in our country. Like we stay talking about tourism now, as an important economic activity in our country. But we don't see heritage playing, that role. I think that there's a lot actually that needs to be done to ensure that we turn this thing around.
Sure. You've cited the Ngugi wa Thiong'o, this prolific Kenyan writer. And one of the books he's written that's really stayed with me is Decolonizing the Mind, where he really explores, I guess, ways through which we can respond to architecture, ideas, even language, such that we preserve our own cultures. I wonder to what extent you reckon part of the challenges lies in our inability to go through this process of decolonizing the mind, to take our cultures, our diversity seriously, but apply that decolonial lens to it so that we don't fall into the traps of some kind of imperialist hegemony that we come from.
Yes, there are many examples where our, heritage policy has actually failed in that. And mentioning the issue of decolonization, so many writers have written on this. There's the issue of kind of the periods that we operate in. I mean, for our heritage policy. Like, for instance, we seem to be starting from 1912, and then the modern civilization, or in the 1900s, I want to say. But we could go more. Like, for instance, to take the writers like Sheikh Anta Diop, who writes beautifully about the ancient civilization, and these are some of the areas where our culture policy is actually lacking in South Africa. That we didn't just wake up and have the world and become part of the universe only in the 1900s. our ancient civilization, that will be seen, for instance, in ancient Egypt, and then how the Kemetic knowledge, the richness of Africa, why Africa is called cradle of humankind, Sheikh Najub, in one of his writings, African Civilization, Myth or Reality, he paints this. The formation of America and how people left as slaves and to Goree Islands and as well as Cape Coast in Ghana, and then some of these, and also coming also to the era where our country was invaded. Not only, in fact, Africa was invaded, and then our country was invaded, and then that history becoming very much important. The wars that were fought, by our own, leaders, traditional leaders, and our people defending our country quite, currently the Khoi and San communities, how they repelled the landing of the Portuguese on the shores of the Cape.
Yeah.
150 years of frontier wars, starting, of course, from 100 years in the Eastern Cape and up there, up to the north. So I'm saying that if we can actually do, I know that the Department of Education has been trying to improve our curriculum, but we have not seen a significant, improvement of our, curriculum, so that our kids actually learn this history, not only for academic reasons, but to ensure that, it becomes part of the consciousness. I like what Anta Diop raises, for instance, when he says that our curriculum must actually appeal, what is called, he uses the term, across all disciplines, we should see our heritage permitted. Someone studying, not only anthropology or history, someone studying maths, there's heritage in maths, there's heritage in science, astronomy, and so forth. So this cross-disciplinarism to ensure that, we are actually a part of Africa.
Yeah.
And then our own curriculum, appeals to that. And at the moment, there's much that needs to be done, in terms of ensuring that our own heritage really becomes a catalyst to socio-economic development, not only in September, but also to ensure that throughout the year we use heritage as a strategic resource, in nation building and socio-economic development.
Absolutely. Thanks for helping us, I guess, make sense in a nuanced way of how we should be looking at this Heritage Day. We never even got to speak about how, activists are looking at, the impact of symbols in the form of the Fees Must Fall, Roads Must Fall movement. Activists also holding a march earlier this year. But hopefully there'll be an opportunity to continue ventilating those issues throughout the course of the next 2 days. Advocate Sonwabile Mancotywa, thanks very much indeed for speaking to us. He's a historian and a heritage expert.